Gary, should I be afraid? Should we be afraid of this class action lawsuit in real estate? Hi there, and welcome to the Chris and Gary Show. My name's Chris Scott, joined by my partner in crime here, Gary Kreth, where we talk about all things real estate. And we've been collectively in the real estate industry for well over 50 years together now, and so we think we have something that we can contribute. If you're enjoying the conversation and you want to take it to the next step, check us out online at thepaperlessagent.com or follow us on Instagram at thepaperlessagent. Well, Gary, I think it's important for us to point out before we get started that we don't want to talk about the merits of the Moehrl case, the class action lawsuit in real estate. We don't want to talk about the merits. We don't want to talk about the validity.
We're not lawyers. We're not lawyers.
But what we want to discuss, though, is make a few predictions about what are the outcomes, what might happen. And here's the most important thing, besides our predictions, because we can make some pretty grounded assessments of what might happen as a result. I think the most important thing is, what can we do to prepare? What can we do to prepare? And, as we were talking about this, these are things, this class action lawsuit represents potential changes that we should be evaluating, assessing anyway as real estate professionals, right? Oftentimes conflict can be a catalyst for positive change if we make it that way. And I think that's exactly what this is. So Gary, what exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting topic. Right now, there's a class action lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors and several major real estate brokerages. And this class action lawsuit is about how buyers agents are compensated. So let's take a step back and look at what is actually happening right now in the industry and what are they looking to change. So first, right now, Chris, if you're a seller and I'm your listing agent and I have a brokerage, we come to you and you say, Chris, we would like to list your home, at X amount of money. And we're going to charge you, say 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 80%, whatever. I mean, it's realistically around, 5, 6%. In Texas, this is what I charge. I charge 6%. Now, and then what I go on to explain is, Chris, my brokerage collects 3%, and then we pay 3% to the buyer's brokerage. So we are enticing a buyer's broker to bring a buyer to buy your home. Never been a problem. That's the way things have always worked. It's just worked out very, very well. Those commissions, by the way, are built into the sales price of the home. That's something very important to understand as we go through this conversation, is these commissions, these fees are built into the sales price of the home. Now, what this class action lawsuit is looking at doing is wiping out the ability for a listing broker to pay the buyer broker their fee, and in fact, forcing the buyer broker to get their fee somewhere else, whether it be from the buyer or through the mortgage as a closing fee. So that's what we're looking at as what's going on right now.
Why does this one matter? Or at least why is it worth paying attention to, I should say? Because first off, I don't think that we should be scared, because if you read the headlines, at least the real estate news publication headlines, they use the words bombshell class action lawsuit, like we should all be running, because of nuclear stuff happening, they really want us to be afraid of this lawsuit. So why does this one matter? Or does it matter more than anything that we've seen in the past, Gary?
That's a great question, because I do believe that so much of what we're seeing in the media these days, it is clickbait. They're just trying to get people riled up over something that, if it does come to fruition, probably will not have an effect for what most pundits are saying, 5 to 10 plus years, if ever.
Wow.
And here's why. If something actually does come down as a judgment, there will be so many additional litigation actions taken that are going to stall it out for a long, long time. There are actually some people saying there are no merits to this, and it may actually never affect us whatsoever.
Let's talk a little bit about some of our predictions of what might happen. Again, all we can say is what might happen or what's
Right.
probable. And maybe we can lean towards the things that are most probable, should class action take place or a verdict take place that changes our industry. But why don't you mentioned something to me that I didn't realize. And you said, hey, it's been going on like this in the commercial real estate industry forever. Right. And so I don't know if everyone realizes that this is how we work in commercial, but I think that some of your predictions are very helpful and useful because we don't have to be afraid.
No, and I think there's no reason to fear. There's no reason to panic because, like Chris said, this has been happening in commercial real estate. In commercial, in most cases, you are paid as a buyer's broker from your buyer. But here's what I will share with everybody, and this is going to be very unpopular for, I believe, most residential real estate agents and brokers, is that it kind of makes sense that the buyer would compensate me for my fee and my time and my energy and everything. So this begs the question, Chris. If this class action comes to fruition and buyers, brokers can no longer demand a fee from the listing broker, okay? And we as buyers, agents, have to collect that fee from our buyers. What really begs the question is, what are you doing to build your identity, to build your brand, to build your trust with your buyers in the market so that it's not a struggle? That, to me, is the question. And here's the thing, Chris. I don't think it takes a class action lawsuit to make us all think about this. We should be doing this regardless of a class action lawsuit.
The reality of making any kind of change is it's still a free market, right? And so all it's going to change is going to shift potato, rob Peter to pay Paul, or whatever the phrase is, right? You're just shifting the line items on the settlement statement is really what's taking place, because the price will, it's not like sellers will make more as a result necessarily, because it's all going to just be baked into the price. Most likely.
This is what's so fascinating. Everybody is so freaking out about this. Here's the thing, Chris, is that if this actually comes to fruition, let's say it happens tomorrow, like that, okay? Snap of a finger. What happens? My prediction is that home values in your marketplace will drop instantly by the percentage amount that the buyer's broker was typically compensated. So in Austin, typically, like if you average everything out, it's about 3%. So my assessment is that, wow, a $500,000 house instantly drops to $485,000. Why? Because there's a fee that is no longer being taken out of that. It's now being paid by the buyer.
Who is affected by that, right? The buyer's affected by the total price or the total cost of ownership.
Correct.
So the buyer's not going to say, oh, I'm going to pay more, no, because they're paying out of pocket for representation.
Now the seller might argue, well, I'm not going to make as much money. On the contrary, if you actually look at some numbers that we've run, what happens is that if that instant price adjustment happens, the seller actually makes more money. So let's assume a house was priced at $500,000, and that was with both buyers and sellers, agents or brokers being compensated within that price. Bam, things change. It drops to $485,000. $485,000, all of a sudden the listing broker makes a little bit less money. All of a sudden the title company makes a little bit less money. Why? Because these things are tied directly to the sales price of the home. So as we kind of dissect these different fees that are tied directly to the sales price of the home, if the sales price does indeed drop, why? Because the cost of doing business is less, so the value of that home is actually less. All of a sudden, the seller makes more money. And in fact, based on the numbers that I ran in Austin, Texas right now, if that happened tomorrow, a seller would actually end up earning $600 more on a $500,000 transaction. However, yes, the listing broker makes less. Why? Because when we were able to charge and demand $500,000 for a home, and charge a percentage point on that. As the price drops, oops, we make less money.
Let me ask you this: do you predict that as a listing agent, you might be able to command a higher fee without having to explain or negotiate the buyer's agent's representation or the buyer's broker? Do you feel like, hey, normally I would charge, around 3%. Now maybe I can charge 4 or 5 because of this dynamic. Do you think that's something that could take place as a listing agent?
I think with skill and with some history, I do think that could happen. Especially, there are some people out there saying that this could wipe out a lot of buyer's agents, which it could. It could. And it's simply because of lack of skill and knowledge and understanding of how things work and lack of ability to brand and identify yourself as that expert buyer's agent. And so if they're not able to do that, could that wipe out a lot of buyers, agents, and brokers? Absolutely.
The ones who don't have the skill, right? So the ones that don't have the skill or don't want to change, they could get wiped out. Let me ask you this. Do you think it'll raise the barrier to entry to get into real estate?
That's a difficult question to answer because the barrier to entry is actually controlled by the real estate commissions of each state. So the barrier to entry is based on the education requirements and the examining principles of each state. Has nothing to do with this lawsuit at all. I want to make very, very clear. Barrier to entry has nothing to do with National Association of Realtors. NAR has nothing to do with barrier to entry. Nothing.
What about barrier to success? Then
barrier to success, absolutely.
Okay.
But barrier to
as
entry,
a buyer's agent,
no. And I find this to be a pervasive conversation and problem in the real estate industry. Is that the barrier to entry in most states throughout the United States? Not sure about Canada, but certainly in the United States, barrier to entry is so low that we literally need a heartbeat and a driver's license and some capacity to pass an exam to get into this industry. Okay. Now, that allows us to enter the industry. That does not in any way guarantee success. So a barrier to success, yes, this lawsuit, if this does come to fruition, could absolutely be a barrier to success and could trim a lot of the fat in this real estate industry and allow more and more transactions to rise to the top 1 percentile of the real estate agents and brokers in this country. So that absolutely could happen. But with barrier to entry, until each state is willing to gut it up and change the way that we allow licenses to be taken, that's not going to happen.
And because it's a free market, the barrier to success is actually the real measurement, the real metric. So what would you predict that let's say, again, I think an interesting way to view this is because even though it's like 5, 10, 15 years out into the future, I think an interesting way to frame these questions that we're asking and talking about is to say, hey, assume snap of a finger, this goes into place tomorrow. So let's say snap of a finger, this goes into effect tomorrow, Gary. You think that there will probably be some attrition with buyer's agents. In terms of activities, what do you think buyer's agents will then do? Will they then negotiate directly with their buyer for a fee, or how do you see that playing out? How do they do it in commercial?
Well, so in commercial real estate, what we do is when we meet with the buyer, we say, hey, here are my fees. I charge X percent upon successful completion of a sale, and you pay that to me directly at closing. And one possibility that people are looking at in the future is maybe being able to wrap that fee into their loan. So it's not an outright cash payment. It's like, okay, it's part of my loan that I pay out over a 30-year amortization schedule, which I think will actually make most buyers feel much more comfortable with it. But in commercial, I mean, we're working with savvy, sophisticated buyers who have done this time and time again. They're like, oh, that's what you charge. Sounds good. If you're that good, you're worth every penny. So that's the way it works. But what I will say is that if we are actually as good as we say we are, perhaps it's time to start demonstrating that, to communicating that, to branding that to our potential buyers, so that when the conversation comes up, it's not a debate, it's not a challenge, it's an acceptance. And here's one thing I will share with you, Chris, is that ever since I got into real estate in 1997, my broker at the time always required that I had a buyer's representation agreement signed. And in that buyer's representation agreement, it says we traditionally, typically, are able to collect our fee, and this is our fee, from the listing broker. However, if on any for sale by owner, expired, withdrawn, or listed property where the broker is not willing to pay our fee, you as a buyer must agree that you will pay our fee. Every single client since 1997, every single one signed it.
No one had a problem with it.
They didn't have a problem with it. Do you know why, Chris?
Why?
It was just a part of doing business.
Yeah.
And it was explained in a way that this is the way we collect our fee. Now, we also explained very clearly before we even got to that point, the value proposition that I as your buyer's agent bring to you as a buyer. So when we do that, it becomes a non-issue. So Chris, you're a marketing specialist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a buyer's agent. I come to you and I say, Chris, oops, this national legislation just came down and I got to switch gears. Chris, I need your help. What am I going to do to set myself apart so that I don't have a problem collecting that buyer's fee?
Well, as you know, according to the National Association of Realtors, the number one determining factor that sellers use in choosing their listing agent is the agent's reputation. And the number one determining factor for buyers when choosing their agent is trust. So what I would see taking place, or what's necessary, is we'll have to adjust our focus from being just simply building trust to focusing on the amplification of that trust, which is our reputation in the marketplace. And so because if you look at reputation, it equals trust, and we can build trust, we can build our reputations, we can do so very methodically. And I believe that should be happening now already, right? I think this is one of those things where you should be building a reputation,
right,
regardless of whether you're a listing agent or a buyer's agent. You should be building and amplifying your reputation in the marketplace so that you're the one so that you're the one that people want to work with. And the fact, if you're not doing
Chris,
that,
I think this is like, I just want to pause for a second and say this is part of the point. When you came to me and you shared this legislation with me, I don't even know how long ago, you said, "Are you concerned about this?" I'm like, "No." And you said, "Why not?" Because we already do what needs to be done to handle any objections that come out of this.
Now, Gary, we started delving into, and I'm most curious about what impact you believe this will have on listing agents. I know that the conversation is about how buyers brokers are getting paid and therefore buyers agents. But let me ask you this, because something tells me that as listing agents, we have a really big advantage in this situation. And that means that everyone has enough time, because we're talking 5, 10, 15 years out into the future, everyone has enough time to become listing agents as part of this process. So what are your predictions for listing agents should, again, snap of a finger, this legislation goes into place tomorrow, which we know that can't happen, but just for the sake of this conversation, assuming that tomorrow this went into effect, what do you think what are your predictions for listing agents?
So I think for a listing agent and brokerage is this. One, I think our value proposition is going to become more important now than ever. Why? Because we can't just throw up a commission on MLS to attract buyers agents to bring their buyers. So that traditionally has been a big value proposition, is that we're going to pay those buyers agents, brokerages, this percentage. And so we got to get better at what we do. We like
So we got to get better at
articulating-
marketing our listings then, because
Absolutely.
there's too many of us who put a sign in the yard, put in the MLS, and pray that it sells, right? So
Yep.
if we can't rely on those buyers that, using that commission to incentivize people to show that property, we are going to have to do more than just put it on the MLS if we want to do a good job.
We're absolutely, we got to get really, really diligent at doing that and marketing ourselves as that listing expert agent. Secondary is, I do believe that with this additional value proposition to rise to the cream of the crop, the top agents and brokerages in the United States are, as listings, going to be able to garner a greater commission. And here's why. If we can show that we're no longer paying the buyer's broker anything, and in fact, if this holds to be true, and buyers brokers are not actually doing as much as they were, we're actually going to be doing a lot more work, which means that we're going to demand a higher fee. So there's going to be a larger opportunity for us to increase our fees, but we can't just do it willy-nilly, right? We actually have to be able to show our value as to why we're doing that.
We've been talking about this, Gary, for literally a decade, right? You and I have been talking about the need for using tools like a property marketing plan to market your listing, using tools like social media and online marketing and paid advertising, to promote listings, because we believe that is good for the seller. It attracts buyers. It attracts more customers to you. It builds your reputation. And so we've been talking about this for a decade. Now, there's more influence as to why people need to prioritize this activity.
Well, and I think you and I shared this with you some time ago, and you're like, you did what? Is that in a time when there were more listings available on the market than buyers, which would make it a buyer's market, I was actually able to go in and demand, in Austin, I would typically demand about a 6% commission, 3% going to the buyer's broker, 3% go to the listing broker. I was able to go in and demand 7, 8, or 9% commission based on the property marketing plan and the value proposition that I had. And so, is that any different than what we're talking about? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Why? Because we're going to go in there and show a much higher value proposition than our competition. And through that higher value proposition, we can demand a higher payment or a higher fee. And so if we prepare ourselves appropriately, educate ourselves, have the appropriate marketing in place, and communicate that effectively, who's to say that listing agents and brokers can't actually make a lot more money through this transition?
Well,
Nobody.
I have a question for you, Gary. Do you think that listing agents being able to double in deals will become more likely because you're going to have buyers contacting you potentially directly, because, it's particularly through the transitional process, assuming we flipped the fingers, snapped our fingers, and this went into effect tomorrow, there's a transitional process. So I would imagine buyers are going to still call on the listing agent, right? Maybe they're going to call or they're going to contact us, and that means there may be more of them reaching out to us directly that are not represented yet. Do you think that's a possibility?
I don't just think it's a possibility. I think I fear that it's going to be a reality. And when I say I fear, is that I don't believe that double ending deals actually does anybody any service other than the broker. It does not help the buyer, and it does certainly not help the seller. Because when we double end deals, we are not allowed at that point to represent either one. We simply facilitate a transaction. And that's not why I got into real estate. I don't believe that is a good, equitable solution for this situation. I do know this for a fact, is that the reason I walked away from commercial real estate was not the money. It was the fact that ethically, most real estate listing brokers did not even submit my buyer's contracts to their sellers because they wanted to double end the deal.
Interesting.
And so it's a slippery slope that I think we can go down, which will likely end up in more class action litigation.
That's just going to lead to another potential class action, right? That's an unintended consequence.
I don't believe that serves anybody in real estate long term.
We've talked a lot about what the impact is going to be and how people can prepare. I think how we prepare is one of the most important things. Can you summarize really quickly what the key things that we can do as listing agents and buyer's agents to prepare for this potential situation that is very far out into the future?
Number one, prepare now. And the way we prepare now is by branding and identifying ourselves as a buyer's agent and as an expert. We need to do this through all of our branding, our education, and our communication. And we need to do this consistently every single month. Number two is that as we meet with buyers, make sure that you articulate your value. Make sure that you're sharing all of what you're going to do during a transaction with them. Number three, make sure that you get a buyer's agent or buyer's brokerage agreement signed. Yes, I understand so many people are like, they don't hold water in court. I'm like, I'm never interested in going to court.
I don't want to go to court with my clients.
But what this does is it clearly shows them and delineates, hey, this is my fee. If I don't collect it from the other side, you need to pay for it. And they sign it. So it's clear communication of what's going on. And then during a transaction, always be clear of communicating exactly what you're doing on their behalf for them. So then when they get to the closing table, they don't look across the table at you and say, wow, Gary, that's the easiest commission you ever got. So I think these are things that we can start doing right now to articulate our value, to communicate that effectively, to actually have a written agreement in place so they understand that they're responsible for this fee, but then also fulfilling on that commitment and that promise every single step of the way.
Yes. And one last thing, don't be afraid and don't be influenced by every single clickbait headline that you see related to this case or any other case for that matter when it comes to real estate. We don't want to put our heads in the sand. I mean, in fact, like we were saying, in so many ways, the preparation that we would do for these potential changes are going to make us better real estate professionals now. And so we should do it anyway, most of these things. It is this conflict that is the seed of future opportunity for our next level of success if we allow it to do so. Don't put your head in the sand. And I think one of the things that we can do is to shore up our ability to gather more listings and to build identities as listing expert agents in the marketplace. Listings are king, and they will continue to be so should something like this take place. And at the Paperless Agent, we've got tons of resources for those of you who want to focus on listings and develop a listing business, or even if you're interested in better buyer resources. Go check out our website where we have lots of great tools, resources. Just go to thepaperlessagent.com. We have a blog, lots of great resources there for you to access.
And by the way, if this video served you in any way, make sure that you like the video, you subscribe to the channel, and if you have any comments of how this might help you or any questions, make sure you comment down below. And with that, we look forward to seeing you on our next video.